ConocoPhillips has announced that it's going to be buying Marathon Oil, $22.5 billion deal. That should be closing in the fourth quarter of this year. We're looking at a whole number of consolidations in the oil and gas industry in the United States. Music. Sony Music has created a financial vehicle, Bitco, to buy the catalog of Queen. It's valued at about $1 billion. Queen has apparently been shopping their catalog for over a year now, and it looks like Sony might actually be purchasing that. Let's get to Tesla, since we mentioned BYD. Elon Musk apparently took some shareholders on a tour around the Tesla factory. Look like he's going on a charm offensive to try to get them to vote on his pay package, which is due June the 13th. There's been some opposition. Let's listen to Marcy Frost, who is with oil and gas company CalPERS.
That is one of the proxy proposals that we will take a serious look at. The team is evaluating it. But as of today, minus the conversation that is yet to happen with Tesla, we would not be voting in favor of that proposal. We do not believe that the compensation is commensurate with the performance of the company.
All right, let's talk to Efosa Aluyi, who's the head of investments at Sankore Global Investments. Efosa, always great to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning. What do you make of what's going on this Elon Musk pay package, the size, the opposition and everything? What's your take on what's happening?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think the key challenge is the fact that in 2018, shareholders had actually voted to support it. Right?
Yeah.
And then you had a shareholder that took the matter to the Delaware courts, and then the judge obviously was against it, and then it's now become an issue. So from Elon's perspective, it looks like we had an agreement. You guys supported it in 2018. As long as I hit certain numbers, which I have hit, it seems like you guys are now beginning to sort of renege on that agreement. I mean, a report was released, by a firm. I mean, these are firms that typically advise institutional investors on how they would vote at meetings, whether it's a special meeting, whether it's an annual meeting, particularly on issues like corporate governance and executive pay. And what they've come out to say is that, if the shareholders approve that pay package, it is going to be dilutive for shareholders, right? A dilution of about 9%, because the package states that Tesla would have to create about 308 million shares, right, to accommodate that package, and that would dilute shareholders by about 9%. So a lot of shareholders now are now beginning to rethink and say, okay, you know what, we're not going to support this. And there are concerns really that if this doesn't go through, if it's not favorable for Elon, that he could potentially step aside, right? And that would be, a very, very serious issue really for the automaker, right? It could create very significant problems because, again, all of these years, one of the biggest challenges for Tesla has been that key man risk of Elon Musk, right? So the idea is that if this doesn't go through for him, he could focus all of his energies on some of his other ventures and all of that. Again, I think the tide that kind of changed is what is the big issue here for Elon Musk. The court in Delaware described that package as being excessive, but again, I think the critical thing that is it had already been agreed on, right? So why change or why renege at this point in time? So I think that those are really the issues right now.
Gotcha. Since we're talking Tesla, what do you make of BYD, this new vehicles they've brought? I think 2,000 kilometers is like driving from Lagos to Kano and back without having to refuel. What do you make of this? What it means for competition and so on?
It just tells you how much competition is sitting within that space and how much innovation really can happen there. It also speaks to the very, very huge support in terms of subsidies that these EV makers in China have been getting, and this essentially is a reflection of that. And this is BYD basically throwing down the gauntlet really to its competitors. And the idea really is not even just to increase market share locally, but they also want to compete with a lot of regional players, particularly Toyota and Honda in Japan. So this is a very, very, very strong move, and obviously the EV makers in the US have to sit up and pay attention.
Wow. Okay, I do want to get your thoughts on this 5-6 week saga between BHP, Anglo American. It looks like the deal did not finally go through. What do you make of this sort of the development there?
I think the the clog in the wheel really was this whole South African thing, right? And Anglo was not ready to untangle that because it would have very significant, blowbacks in SA, so it wasn't ready to do that. And obviously, BHP wasn't ready to take them on with that, issue really. As a matter of fact, Anglo has been courted by quite a number of people over the last couple of years, but that issue in South Africa still remains a big concern for a lot of the people. And, Anglo is a major, copper guy, right? This would have been a very strong copper play or copper pivot for BHP. I mean, copper prices are up about 26% this year alone. All of the whole AI move, EVs, surging demand for electronics, copper sits at the heart of that, right? So this would have been a very strong play, but unfortunately, they couldn't quite iron out, those issues that have to do with South Africa. So, and right now, Anglo would have to convince shareholders that they have a really strong plan to remain very solid, while BHP probably has to look for another player that they can use or another strategy that they can use to leverage up its copper play.
How do you see mining? Mining, as far as natural resources, what it means to different economies around the world. How do you see going forward, where copper prices are and everything else? It's still going to be a major talking point moving forward, yeah?
Absolutely right. So the demand is really strong, particularly for copper and some other rare earth metals, right? Again, this is really driven by all of the AI transformation that's going on. A lot of these metals are used in making all these chips, also making the hardware as well. And as long as that demand is set to continue to rise, we'll continue to see very strong demand for copper. Again, if you look at the supply side, there also seems to be some sort of lag as well. So you put a situation where you have very strong demand, supply isn't necessarily meeting up with that. The prices are certainly going to stay on the ascendancy for quite some time.
All right, over to oil and gas. ConocoPhillips and this Marathon deal that was just announced, this 22, is always interesting. One deal is collapsing, another deal is being signed. What do you make of that development there?
I mean, we've seen a flurry of, acquisitions really in the U.S. Energy sector over the last 1 year thereabout. We had acquisitions by Exxon, we had acquisitions by Chevron, about 50, 60 billion respectively, over the last 1 year thereabout. Also, it's also part of the plan to kind of consolidate on, the shale assets, that sits within the U.S. I mean, shale accounts for about 36% of production in the United States, crude oil production in the United States. The U.S. produces, as at 2023, about 12.3 million barrels per day, if you include condensate. So all of these are, moves to essentially consolidate on the energy security in the U.S., whilst ensuring that they take advantage of that shale patch, which has kind of declined a bit, but the prospects there remain really, really strong.
Now, how would you fit this into the renewable energy discussion if you still have all these big deals that are taking place in the US in fossil fuels?
So I think these are bets on the fact that you're probably going to have a Donald Trump comeback, right? Okay. And if you have a Trump 2.0, honestly, all of the whole green energy talk will have to take a backseat for another 4 years. And I think these guys are basically betting on that.
Wow. Finally, I don't know if you're a Queen fan. The news that Sony is, I guess, exploring purchasing their portfolio, their catalog, basically. How have you seen that developing with all these artists selling off their catalogs to these companies?
I think for me, it's really very strong lessons for even investment managers and a place like Nigeria, right, where our music seems to have gone global, and monetization has gotten significantly better, right? So what these guys are essentially doing is basically creating a fund where you buy these rights and then you can leverage it over a very long period of time. You can. It's essentially like buying an asset and then sweating it.
Right.
That's the whole idea here. So this is a lesson really, particularly in Nigeria. It says that, to my mind, there is an opportunity for these sort of vehicles to be sort of replicated in our own environment to take advantage of what we've got going on in culture, in arts, in entertainment, and be able to grow that. Because what happens is that these artists get these huge payoff. They're able to do a lot of stuff with that money, create more as well. So imagine a situation where you have that here in Nigeria. A lot of people are still up and coming. So we have grown quite significantly, but I think that there's much more that can be done. And these sort of vehicles can unlock and open up, the potentials even more.
Fantastic stuff. Efosa Aluyi, Head of Investments at Sankore Global Investments. Always a pleasure having you on the show, sir, to discuss all these major business stories. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.